So much peeing. Paul went also to leave. I like when we do movies that don't have sequels. We don't do that a ton, but it's interesting.
You gotta do your unemployment. I know. So you could get it started and I can do yoga, but then I think you need my help sooner than it would take me to do yoga.
I can read Animorphs.
You can always start it and you can save it as a draft.
I think we all agreed on Animorphs. Yeah?
Yes.
All right.
Continuing completed classics. Fulfilling failed franchises. Reinvigorating reviled rehashes. It's the follow-up Showdown! With Paul Getz, Travis McMaster, and Lauren Picorni.
Hiya uppers and heya downers. Welcome back to the follow-up Showdown 2 Nerds in Quarantine, where we continue to give worthy second chapters to stories that don't have them. I am your host, Paul Getz, and with me are Travis McMaster and Lauren Picorni. How are you guys?
Much better after hearing that.
And this is not a musical episode. I just had that bit in my mind and I didn't want to lose it. If this is the first time you're joining us, the way it works is we take a movie with either no sequel or a sequel that falls one time blob short of a decent arc and take our individual turns trying to come up with a better one. Today, the movie we'll be focusing on is Darko, the 2009 straight-to-video sequel to the 2001 independent cult classic Donnie Darko. Lauren, I believe this was your suggestion?
Yeah, Donnie Darko is just a really good, nice spooky Halloween movie. It takes place in October.
Now, I did find it interesting that while Donnie Darko is a Halloween movie, Darko was a 4th of July movie.
The world's got to end on a holiday, guys.
I love that sort of Nightmare Before Christmas idea that it's some producer with a cigar. It's a Darko movie, so get your calendars out.
I don't know that there were any cigar-chomping producers involved in that sequel. But before we get too far into talking about it, it is time for 2 Travis McMaster minutes.
2 Travis McMaster minutes.
Are you ready, Travis?
As ever, I will be.
All right.
So Donnie Darko takes place in Middlesex, Virginia in 1988. Donnie Darko is a very bright but somewhat troubled young student in high school. He has sleepwalking problems, I guess. A mysterious airplane engine falls through his roof onto his bed where he would have been had he not been out, setting into motion a series of events that include discovering a motivational speaker as a pedophile, his girlfriend being run over by a car, and the perhaps discovery of time travel through force of will. He collects a couple of mentors, a teacher at school who is sort of bound by the laws of what he is and is not allowed to discuss with students, and Roberta Sparrow, the local eccentric and perhaps inventor or discoverer of the philosophy of time travel. And then he ultimately has to somehow sacrifice himself by letting the airplane engine fall on him in the past to set right what once went wrong, hoping that each leap would be his leap home. So Darko takes place in 1995. His youngest sister, not Maggie, she wouldn't come back, has grown up a little bit, also disturbed, and is now starring in a Levi's commercial from 2010. Fresh off the wheels of Coachella or perhaps that Aerosmith music video Crazy, she and her smoky-voiced friends break down in a small town where a sexy teenager offers to help her. Then she pulls a feather out of the TV. Instead of Frank the Bunny, she sees herself in a really pretty dress in her dreams, guiding her towards something. There's a a traumatized, I think, war vet from One Tree Hill floating around the town. Some people get murdered. She dies in a car crash halfway through the movie, and her smoky voice friend takes over, and then time travel. She sets
All right,
right.
well, I gave you an extra 30 seconds too. I mean, I didn't, that's a tough one. I didn't envy you that challenge. S. Darko, there's too much going on in it. They didn't pick any kind of lane. And Donnie Darko's, I mean, it's not necessarily straightforward, but it is pretty simple when you break it down into a story. So
Donnie Darko follows a thread that you can either follow or get behind as a theory, whereas S. Darko just tried to do a bunch of references of Donnie Darko without grasping what they were going for.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't really understand, like, the chest spears. I don't think they understand what the time travel aspect is.
Yeah, I mean, before we get too far into talking about the specifics of S. Darko, I'm trying to think what was maybe worth mentioning. There is a child murderer in S. Darko.
Right,
Or
is that
a team of them.
Is that what happened?
I mean, I think it's the preacher and the Jesse from Saved by the Bell were taking kids just to trap them in a mine and let them starve to death.
I thought it was just the preacher. Was she in on it too?
I thought it was just the girl.
I think it was both. I will say, like, they established early on in S. Darko that there is a perv somewhere in town, and one of the more fun, I say in quotes, fun things I had to do in S. Darko was go, okay, who's the perv? Could be that guy, could be that guy, could be that guy, could be that guy.
Everyone who showed up, like, just looked like pieces of shit. I'm like, all these people are like assholes, man.
Except for the waitress.
Oh, she was great. And I think...
I guess I didn't
reveal
pick up that there was, like, a murder mystery happening in the background.
Separately from that, there are meteorites that are actually tesseracts that are changing one of the perv candidates into an evil person with a horrible, horrible rash. Yeah.
See, I kind of disagree with what y'all were saying. I feel like the director, whatever he got out of Donnie Darko is something that it's very different than I got out of Donnie Darko, because S. Darko felt very cohesive to me, and it did feel very well made. I feel like S. Darko did exactly what it was trying to do. I was just not overly interested in what it was trying to do. It didn't speak to me.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that it is well made and it's well acted. I would say the worst actor in it is probably S. Darko herself, which she's maybe just young, at that point.
Well, again, it felt like she was doing what the whole movie wanted that character to be doing.
Yeah, which was, I guess, not having emotion, really.
Ice Queen.
I guess I would just say that it was trying to do too much. I understand that Donnie Darko has a lot of, like, layers to it and things to read into and weird things, visuals happening, but I feel like they're all connected to one overarching story, whereas this was about 6.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll circle back to S. Darko in a bit.
We'll get back.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about Donnie Darko. My experience seeing it for the first time, I was in high school for sure. It was like that. I remember that and Fight Club being the two movies that everybody was talking about as, like, you have to see it. It's transformative. Whatever you think it's about, that's not what it's about. Like, it was like almost like a challenge posed to see this movie and get it. I hadn't seen it since high school until this viewing, which I loved it again. Loved it. I loved it more than I ever thought I did. But I remember in high school just sort of having an attitude of like, I get it. I saw it. Get it. No problem. I don't
get it.
And I feel comfortable watching it now that I get it enough to make myself content with it. Yeah. But at the same time, I appreciate its openness to interpretation.
I had a similar experience too. I saw it for the first time in college, and then I didn't watch it for a while, and I watched it again, I think maybe like 2 years ago. Then it rang a little more pretentious than I remembered, but then this time I watched it and it did not do that, so I think I was just in a mood.
I do see what you're talking about. There were a couple times when they got into a little bit of dialogue that just sort of pointed out to me that's like, okay, this is a young director. He's doing some things that aren't necessarily ideal artistic choices. However, for the most part, I would say almost all of them are justified by the end of the movie. Like,
yeah,
a lot of Donnie's speeches connect to something else. There's so much interconnectivity in this movie that by the end of it, just sort of replaying it again in your head is really, really fun. And sort of seeing all the connections that you didn't know were going to be there or didn't remember were there. One of my very favorites of those is the speech that he makes when he's yelling at, I'm forgetting her character's name. The woman who's played a menacing mother since her birth.
Sparkle Motion.
Oh, yeah. Miss Farmer. I don't know her, the actress name.
Which I should. She's in so much, and she's so fantastic.
Yeah, she does always play that same kind of role, though.
When he's yelling at her because she's trying to get him to place the X on the line between love and fear, and he's saying you can't lump everything into two categories. The world is more complex than that. What I really love is that in the end, when he completes the timeline and effectively saves his mother, sister, and girlfriend from dying, those are like the easy connections to make that he did something good. And then they give you that sequence at the end of showing everyone that he was connected to. And the pedophile is no longer in jail and Mrs. Farmer is still following his lead. So there is also darkness related to the fact that he's no longer there. And that goes back to proving his point that you can't just have it all good or all bad.
Yeah.
Everything is a more complex issue than that, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah.
Beth Grant.
Beth Grant.
That's that actress' name. What a forgettable name. I feel like I will forget that name again. But
Right, but we all remember Will Smith's name.
maybe if she released an album called Big Bethy Style, we would we'd be able to latch on to it a little bit more. When it was presented to me in high school, it was just already a thing. People knew about Donnie Darko. This is a movie that you watch. I never knew sort of where it came from or what its past was. It premiered at Sundance. It was distributed by Drew Barrymore's production company in an agreement that she would get to play Miss Pomeroy, which I have thoughts about that in a minute. Because of her, the movie was released in theaters and not straight to video or on straight to Stars, which is where it was more than likely going to end up before that happened. But then the original advertising material for the movie featured a plane crash, and it was released right around 9/11. So they pulled all the advertisements for it, so it effectively had none and greatly underperformed at the box office, and then sort of built its cult status over time, I guess. But I don't know that I know that many movies that have done something like that so effectively on video. In addition to that, it did apparently do a lot of cool sort of underground advertising online. It was one of these first movies to sort of build a website that was sort of based in the universe of the movie, kind of like The Matrix.
Okay.
And I have not been able to look at that website because it's old. And like the Flash player is disabled and I can't look at it. But supposedly that website is full of puzzles and secrets and contains information about fates of many of the characters after the film ends that are like sanctioned by the filmmaker. So I do want to find it and look at it.
Damn, that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
You just got to get a really old computer to look at it on.
I know that they call them chess spears in the movies and they never say this otherwise, but the director calls them time blobs, which is where I got that term. Yeah. And apparently he got that idea, the writer and director, Richard Kelly, in case anybody doesn't know, this is like 100% his baby. He got the idea from watching football and seeing them use like how they do when they draw on the screen. So John Madden was doing that with like, here's where like on an instant replay, they paused the instant replay and said, here's where he's going to go. This is what he's going to do. And then they played it and watched him follow that line. And that's where the director got the idea for the chess spears.
I'm not trying super hard to be funny when I say I would not have guessed Richard Kelly got any of his ideas for Donnie Darko from football.
So some actors' notes I have on the movie. Vince Vaughn was the first person approached to play Donnie. And he himself believed he was too old for the part. So good on you, Vince.
I was going to say, yeah. Jake Gyllenhaal was 20 when he filmed this.
And even he looked a little old. Mark Wahlberg was also approached, but insisted.
He instantly started yelling and barking at the man who approached him. So backed away slowly.
It's actually kind of similar to that. He apparently insisted that the character have a lisp. Richard Kelly hated that and so said, no, not you, I guess.
Bullet dodged.
And then Jason Schwartzman was also, I think, offered the role, but he was making another movie at the time.
Would it have been Rushmore? No, that would have been the year before.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it was Slackers. He really felt the need to bring that one home.
Listen, as far as what the paycheck would have been for Slackers versus Donnie Darko,
fair.
I can't fault Jason for
That's true.
making that choice.
I do know Mary McDonnell was paid scale for this, but she was so excited to do it that she got a speeding ticket on her way to the first day of set. She couldn't wait to get there.
Aww.
That's adorable. I love her so much.
My goodness, yes. I mean, always have, always will. She's never anything less than spectacular. Consistent in this movie. I did want to bring up her husband in the movie, Holmes Osborne, whose name I never knew before this rewatch. I love that guy. He's also the dad in That Thing You Do. That's the first thing I ever associate him with. And he's just the perfect dad. He is just the perfect, goofy, definitely conservative dad.
He's got a lot of character. Like, I love this scene when he's talking about Roberta Sparrow, and he just, like, has his hand, like, sort of, it's oddly placed on his face, but it looks so comfortable, and it's like a character choice, and it works.
All the laughing he does at inappropriate moments, and I mean, he's just...
Yeah.
From the beginning, he brings just sort of the universe home. And I would definitely call that a huge part of the difference between Donnie Darko and S. Darko, where Donnie Darko really puts you in this familiar universe that you understand and know and can laugh at all the way through. And S. Darko is just like, here's this weird town, Stephen King types, no one really to hold on to, and no jokes.
I know we're not there yet, but my biggest problem with S. Darko was there was no character I wanted to cut to. No matter who we cut to, I was just not interested in watching.
Yeah.
Whereas in Donnie Darko, I'll watch literally anyone. I'll watch Beth Grant for 2 hours.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And everybody's arc was super, super full. Also considered, or I don't know if he was offered, but to play Eddie Darko, the dad, Tim Robbins. I'm sure that would have been
cool,
fabulous. Yeah. Samantha Darko, S. Darko, was offered originally to Mara Wilson from Mrs. Doubtfire and Matilda, but she passed because she didn't understand the script.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Supposedly a lot of people didn't. According to Seth Rogen, he and Jake Gyllenhaal admitted to each other at the wrap party that they had no idea what the movie was about.
It's tricky.
Yeah. Going way back to your 2 Travis McMaster minutes.
We don't have to go back.
Only because I think you did an excellent job with Donnie Darko. The only aspect I was surprised to hear left out was Frank the Rabbit.
Absolutely left him out.
I have no excuse. I have nothing.
You even said that Johnny sleepwalked and was lured away.
You don't understand the pressure of a McMaster minute.
But yes, Frank the Rabbit, he's probably the most famous Donnie Darko image.
Frank's so great because that really shouldn't work. That should really shatter something for me. The movie should stop working for me where I go, okay, this is, even for high school, this is a bit much, but for some reason it all works.
I mean, I think it works from the beginning regardless because you're just fascinated by what Frank is and what is happening. But in the end, when the reveal is that it is a costume designed by a young guy, by a kid that they go to high school with, and that guy just has sort of an artistic flair, that's super cool. And that super, super works. And was maybe the most upsetting thing in S. Darko was that they just put a rabbit in there with no motivation for it whatsoever, as if rabbits are synonymous with time travel or prophecy or something, and really it has nothing to do with that.
The rabbit. It was specifically a Frank
made out of some
bit of.
He did it off of a sketch he found in Samantha's book, but that's just what I'm talking about. That movie just putting in references without understanding why they were in the first movie in the first place.
And a huge plot hole that drove me crazy as soon as I saw the book in S. Darko. She wouldn't have the book because if Donnie is killed by the turbine, then he doesn't get the book from Professor Monotov, and there's no way for it to get to her.
Well, hang on.
It was a new book. It could be that...
Are we arguing that because Donnie didn't have a book, that book doesn't exist, and there's no way Samantha could find
But
that book.
The version of the book that she has in S. Darko is supposedly drawn in by Donnie.
That is what.
Wait, but
right,
do we?
Right.
Wait, do we? Oh, so that version of the book she has Donnie's
Right,
And we
drawing.
see him get the book in Donnie Darko.
Okay, withdrawn. I would like to withdraw my defense.
Here's one more question on Frank. Did you understand that Frank and Elizabeth, Maggie Gyllenhaal's character, were dating?
I did not. Until you just told me just now, I did not. I knew that she knew him.
That's crazy.
Because there was a moment.
Yeah.
Because there was the moment where she said Frank went to get beer before you see the note that Frank went to get beer.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that they were dating. No.
Yeah, that's so crazy to me because, like, I brought it up and, like, Travis is like, well, why do you know that? And I just had a moment where I was just like, I guess I can't prove it, but, like, whenever she, like, comes in the house, like, you know, like, she's, like, seems to be, like, a little bit like, ooh, I'm in love. And you hear the horn.
Interesting.
And then in the beginning of the movie, whenever Donnie is biking back home, you see Frank's car going in the opposite direction, I assume, going from seeing...
I didn't know that, but that makes sense. I mean, I knew they was going, but I didn't. I never connected those dots. That's really awesome because, like, that is another subplot in addition to so many that are there for you to find, but not made apparent. For example, the guy that Donnie refers to as the fat guy who's watching them.
Oh yeah,
he's supposedly an FBI agent sent to keep an eye on the Darkos after the plane accident. The director
really?
said there's a woman who's in the credits, just mysterious woman. It's not the talent show. She's there when Jim Cunningham is giving the sort of conference where Donnie speaks out on the microphone at school. She's there, like, taking notes, and supposedly she is a scout from Star Search. So she's connected to the Sparkle Motion subplot, but it's not something that they ever point out. It's just something that the director's like, yep, that's who she is, in case you ever wondered. All kinds of, like, layers and layers and stuff like that. That's just fun. None of it seems silly. None of it seems heavy-handed. It's just a lot of cool ideas.
Yeah.
Man, yeah, I loved this movie. The more I talk about it, the more I just loved it. I can't believe I ever had an attitude about it. One thing I wanted to bring up that I thought was super cool just because of the implications. The note left by Frank on the fridge that says Frank went to get beer, in his handwriting, in theory, the same handwriting as the spray paint on the ground after Donnie bursts the pipe and floods the school. So the implication there is that Frank was somehow present and involved, even though when we find out who Frank is in the end, he's unaware of the importance he plays in Donnie's decision-making and arc. Or then the question becomes, is he?
Is he the dreamer or the dream?
So, yes, what I know we haven't gotten into pitches yet, but I thought a fun, not prequel, not sequel, but paralleliquel for this movie would be like a short film called Frank Anderson, in which we see his perspective on the whole situation. Because probably he's not going to be as aware or as following the thread as Donnie, but there's probably more to that story.
One theory could be, like, perhaps Frank possesses Donnie, and that's why the handwriting is his.
That's interesting. Walking it.
Yeah, like he's, like, literally, like, he's possessing him. He's like, wake up, and he's making him go.
Right, but he, Frank, the person, is he aware of that at all? Or is he having visions, or is he experiencing sensations? Because, and I will say, I know that the director's sort of goal with S. Darko was to, instead of telling the story from the perspective of the receiver, which is what Donnie is considered in terms of the timeline, he's doing it from the perspective of the manipulated dead, which I guess is S. Darko. And she does not seem aware of any of the visions she's projecting. She is not following any sort of thread the whole movie. She is appearing to the receiver, who I suppose is Iraq Jack, but she is not herself affecting any of the change or the decision making.
Yeah. So you could argue that it's not from her perspective at all, but just a thing you said after you made a movie the other way.
That's the thing in that movie, like, whose perspective is it? That, like, shimmer, touchable wall, intangible thing does not represent a link between you and the dead. I think that it's sort of. I don't think so.
What is it?
I don't know. I assume it's the wall between worlds, between universes. Which, I guess you could argue that means the dead. Anyway, I didn't like the movie.
Yeah, no. Okay, well, I guess I did want to ask as sort of a fun question about Donnie Darko in particular. Do you guys think that Donnie had a choice?
I think he does have a choice to a certain extent, but everybody around him has choices too, which may influence or like nudge his choice in a certain direction, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, I certainly feel like by the time he has to make the choice, there are an overwhelming number of things pushing him towards the choice that he makes that like benefit everybody. I mean, he stops the world from ending.
Yeah, he does make a choice, right? He makes a choice in the movie.
Is your question like, can he time
No.
travel at will?
My question, I guess, ultimately is not necessarily does he have a choice, but in your opinion, does he make a choice? Because the way it's shown, it's arguable, I think.
I feel like it's less necessarily a choice, but more circumstances and things lining up in an inevitable way that he then comes
and
to
is okay
realize
with, I guess, because he laughs.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right.
Well, I feel like he has a choice because he makes one. At the end, he changes things.
I don't know that it's apparent that he does. You see him on the ridge, and then he's in his room, and so it's arguable whether he ever had a choice or he ever made a choice. Yeah. But I'm not saying I disagree with you. I think yes, that he did, and that he was okay with it. But I also think that for him to make the other choice would have said something very different about the character, which is let the world burn.
I feel like more things lined up in the way they're supposed to be, and he realized it and he was okay with it. I don't think he necessarily had the choice to time travel. I think it just happened. He was like, oh, I see the plan. I see how everything lined up. And I'm like, cool.
I disagree. I feel like the whole movie is about choice. All the characters constantly making choices and changing their own lives, and Frank doesn't say you will burn it down. He tells him to burn it down. If that makes sense.
He doesn't have a choice.
He tells him to burn it down. If he didn't have a choice, he says you will burn it down.
It's part of what he and Professor Monatoff are discussing is whether there is choice, like how he's contradicting himself with the concept of time travel, because at some point there would be an inherent choice. So I guess it's arguable. It's open to interpretation. I mean, and I love it. And that's an out, certainly, that everybody can take. I think he does make a choice, and I'm happy with it. And ultimately, I think it's the choice that character would make anyway, because he is, I would say, more on the love side than the fear side. We've written our love letters to Donnie Darko, and so I guess we are on to S. Darko anyway. Whereas Donnie Darko had an 87% on Rotten Tomatoes, very well reviewed in general from its premiere at Sundance. S. Darko capped out at a 13%, which, to be honest, in terms of how well it was made, I think that's a little harsh. I'm not going to say I liked it, but there are certainly worse movies that I think have gotten better scores.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad movie. Like I said earlier, I like the story overall. I like the feather thing. I like the Tesseract thingies. There are parts of it I liked the cast. I even kind of liked the sort of interpretation of her in the dress as the new Frank or whatever.
I would say I would agree that it at least seemed cohesive and was a well realized enough vision that I didn't particularly care for, especially considering where it came from. So 20th Century Fox owned the rights to Donnie Darko. Richard Kelly signed them over when he was 24 years old. So they won the right to release a sequel on home video. And the director, being a huge Donnie Darko fan, wanted to put his name on the brand somewhere. And that director is Chris Fisher, who really has only ever done TV. He did a couple of low-budget horror movies early in his career, but he's pretty exclusive to TV. And the writer, Nate Atkins, almost exclusively a TV movie writer who wrote, most famously, A Christmas Prince, the Netflix low-budget sensation from a few years ago. And he's written all of those. There's probably 3 of them already. Apparently, Richard Kelly hates that it exists. He would rather nobody ever ask him about it. He's never seen it. He's never read it. He never will.
Yes.
And is apparently bitter towards the people who made it, saying, those people made a lot of money. They're still making a lot of money off of my work.
That can't be right.
I mean, maybe, I don't know.
We didn't make any money.
Maybe I just don't know how movie money works.
If people love Darko, they went to go see us Darko.
But when I look at almost any made-for-TV movie, or one of these straight-to-video sequels like the ones that we're looking at on this show, what I think is those that are less perhaps discerning than the likes of us cinephiles are just people who decide they like a movie, don't really analyze why, and then go, well, I'll put in the next one. And then they maybe go, oh yeah, it wasn't as good, but I liked it. I watched it. I own it.
I'm well aware of the phenomenon of people just pointing at a movie and going, there's a word in there I recognize, I'll watch it. I'm aware of that phenomenon. What I'm saying is the people who like Donnie Darko are us, and we won't watch that movie. The people who will watch that movie, they didn't watch Donnie Darko.
I'll try to look into it and I'll see. I'll let you know what I find out.
You let Richard Kelly know. He's the one who needs to hear it. That man is hurting.
He has said, he said in an interview in 2017 that he has an idea for another film that would be set in the world of Donnie Darko, describing the project as much bigger and more ambitious than the original, and he has not yet secured the financial resources to make the film.
Well, maybe he should not make 3 unsuccessful movies and then plan a 4th 15 years later that's bigger and more ambitious.
Well,
if you made a cult classic, and then you did a follow-up movie that no one but me liked, and then you did a follow-up to that no one but me saw, maybe your next project shouldn't be, okay, I figured out the problem. Give me even more money.
But I could see also the logic being, you know what, I'll circle back. I'm going to go back to the beginning, and I'm going to try again. I don't know.
Yeah.
Fun fact, my only real fun fact from S. Darko is that, as you mentioned, the feather that she pulls out of the television, apparently this was put into the script and into the movie as a nod to The Ring, because that actress who plays S. Darko was the girl in The Ring. Because in that movie, she's a ghost capable of coming out of a TV. They thought, oh, wouldn't it be fun if that actress could reach into a TV in this film?
Well, that's a dumb reason to do that, but it ended up being pretty cool. I was saying to Lauren last night, though I don't really care for the movie, I really enjoyed the new mythology, the ways they extended the Darko mythology with the feather and the Tesseract and etc. I liked that stuff. There just wasn't enough of that kind of thing to kind of get me through the parts I didn't like. Also, I'm going to call him Basil Rathbone again like a jerk.
It's something Rathbone. Andrew Rathbone?
Who are you? What character?
The nerd.
The scratchy,
by the way, just to talk about that rash for a second, it was so hideous and disgusting that when I understand that she's emotionless, she's an ice queen, whatever, but when she sees it and she goes, oh, what's that? And he goes, it's just a rash. No chance would I let that go. It is bleeding onto his shirt. It is oozing. It's huge. There is absolutely no way I would be able to change the subject. I would be like, that looks infected and horrible. I'm going to help you get to the house. She has nothing to do.
She does call it gnarly.
That's later. She doesn't do that until later. When it's, when it's like impossibly.
If it was me, if I had just met this guy and I saw he was openly bleeding from several giant monster wounds, the first thing I would do is go to a second location with him at night in the middle of nowhere.
After he buys me a dress and has creeped on me, repeatedly.
Yeah. He bought me a dress and then steps into my hotel room and closes the door behind him. I'd be like, let's see where this
loudly.
goes.
He slams the door.
It's Jackson Rathbone, by the way.
Jackson Rathbone. he did a great job. I thought everybody with what they were given did a great job. What's his name? Westwick, Ed Westwick from Gossip Girl as the James Dean type. He was great. I thought everybody was pretty damn great in this movie, despite their content being less than. Okay, so disgusting wound aside. Okay, and the last thing I want to say about that is she's got nothing to do. She's essentially just decided to bum around this town, not paying motel fees or having any kind of plan for the foreseeable future. So she can take him to the hospital.
Do you not remember being in your 20s, Paul?
I just know that in my 20s, I would have insisted that guy accompany me to a doctor immediately. I mean, or at least I would be like,
oh God, I didn't even take myself to a doctor.
I just wouldn't
20s.
have been able to let that go. I would have gone in and like talked to his parents and be like, have you seen this? Have you seen your kid's arm? I mean, like he's doing a terrible job hiding it.
Sound like you were a pretty fucking nerdy 20-year-old.
I would do the same thing.
Yeah, you're definitely a nerdy 20-year-old. I would have said like, yo, let me rub myself on your rash. See what happens.
That's so cool.
Gross.
Oh, that's so cool. Oh man, I never realized how cool. Okay, so some actors' notes from S. Darko. Maggie Gyllenhaal and Jake Gyllenhaal were both offered a chance to cameo and both declined. Patrick Swayze was supposed to be in it, reprising his role as Jim Cunningham, but his poor health kept him from doing so, and he died within a month of the film's release.
I always forget. It feels so much more recent that he died.
Yeah. Well, this 2009.
My heart.
The last thing I wanted to make sure to bring up before we move into pitches is one of my what I thought was going to be my favorite things in S. Darko was when they killed her. I mean, they kill her a couple times and then undo it both times. But
yeah.
And I loved it.
I mean, even though the coverage on it was poor, when she died in the car crash and Corey became the protagonist for a minute there, I thought that was pretty cool. And to be honest, up to that point in the movie, I didn't have glaring problems with the story. So I was a little bit like, you know what? This movie might be giving me something that I'm not expecting. Then Corey's storyline that's when she grabs the book, which she shouldn't have. Huge plot hole. So that was essentially the beginning of the descent for me. And then she just sort of undoes that and switches places with S. Darko again, which I really disliked because that was the beginning of just, let's take what was established in Donnie Darko and play with it however we want without any kind of consistency. It made it seem like time travel is just a thing that's easy to just do.
They don't even really establish how it's achieved in S. Darko.
Yeah, and it also made, like, her visions were of the little boy who eventually dies in the cave. Her visions were the little boy telling her what to do, but that's not what Frank does to Donnie. Frank does tell Donnie to do things, but he doesn't explain to him, here's the effect it'll have, here's where you need to go, here's what you need to do. Like that just made it less of like almost like an inevitable path that Donnie was on versus in S. Darko where it's just sort of like, oh, well, Ghost will tell us what to do and then we can time travel. No problem.
Well, Frank does tell him to burn down Swayze's house. He shows him the house. He says burn it down.
Yes, but I would say it is potentially arguable in Donnie Darko that Donnie is sick and Donnie is doing these things himself. I mean, I agree that probably that's not the case, but at the same time, Frank is also not clarifying, oh, your friend died? Well, here's what you can do to bring him back. You can time travel and here's how.
And that's the trick with kind of sequel stuff in general is how much do you want to see what you've already seen and not have stuff like messed with? And how much do you want things expanded on and carried further? How much are we going to play with the fiction versus how much are we going to leave alone so you can, enjoy the house?
I mean, I just think consistency should be the first topic of discussion when you're trying to sequelize something. You should have that discussion of like, what are the rules and what do we not want to, especially if you're taking someone else's vision and tacking something on. I feel like if anything, then you would want to tread even more lightly with the rules. But I guess maybe not if you're the mind behind the Christmas Prince. I much prefer the Donnie way.
The Donnie way. Are we going to do real quick? Are we going to do unsung heroes?
We are,
for
but
Donnie Darko
that comes
before we
after
move
the
on?
pitches. That's
Is that after? Okay,
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure. Did you hear that? Did you hear him say that's the format? Did you hear that little dig at me?
well,
I heard
I
that.
know you're not much of in the way of a listener of the program, so
That's not because I don't like the show. Because I hate my voice.
I would say that you have the best voice of us three. And if we were ever to have listeners, I would love for them to write in and let us know what they think.
Good
Lovely deep voice.
God, do not. This goes for you
silky,
too as
baby.
well. No one should ever tell me what they think of me. Yeah, there's no good answer. I'm not going to win. A compliment will sting, and the truth will. Did you see how I just called the truth the opposite of a compliment? Good Lord.
Okay, well, I guess, I don't know, anyone else wants to say about S. Darko?
Jackson Rathbone was. God, they just tried too hard to make him look like a nerd, and then give him his glasses came off as he was starting to nutty professor himself into a cool murderer or whatever. Anyway, I don't like the movie, but that's not the movie's fault.
I'd go as far as to say the movie ruined my day. The one part, I didn't like it, but I was just really amused by how pretentious it was. Whenever she opens the drawer in the hotel, and there's the Bible there in the drawer, and she puts the science book on top of the Bible. Ooh, symbolic.
At that point, I was still so mad because she shouldn't have the book. I was still just I cannot wait to scream about this.
She could get her hands on another copy, but it has Donnie's pictures
I also
in it, so.
took that book, the way Noah Wyle hands it over to him in Donnie Darko. I took that book as being the only reason I have this is because I knew her. You know what I mean? I took it as there aren't a bunch of copies of it. This is what that woman did before she went mad. I guess I just got the assumption that it wasn't a readily available book that anybody
Kind of.
Oh, okay. So jumping back to Donnie Darko and what I wanted to say about Drew Barrymore, super glad that she produced the film and made it happen. Her character was the one thing that did not work for me in the movie. I don't dislike Drew Barrymore, but her character I don't think offered much in the way of the plot. And really, I just found her to be, I don't know, she was almost written immaturely, like a young boy's fantasy type of character.
She was very, very acty. Yeah. I'll argue for her importance, though, because as far as the whole theory of the tangential universe being manipulated by those in the primary universe, she gets Donnie and Gretchen together, which is crucial.
Yeah.
She's responsible
that scene
for that.
Was where her character stopped working for me, though, just because it was sit next to whichever boy you think is the cutest. And then she watches it voyeuristically, where it's what I feel you're supposed to read from her is, oh, she's a cool teacher. She's cool and she actually inspires the kids. Whereas that to me seems so needlessly inappropriate that I was a little bit oh, this lady is weird.
I totally get what you mean with her, and I see it. It doesn't bother me, though, but I do see how she's kind of
yeah, and I think that's maybe, I think Drew's strengths perhaps don't lie with that type of character. I think she's an actress I like to see have fun a little bit more than I like to see her wax philosophical.
Yeah, it's a pretty straight character.
I love Drew Barrymore so much. I think she's wonderful. I think her acting choices in this movie are choices I don't maybe understand or always agree with, but I certainly can't argue against.
She stands out because everybody's so damn good. You know what I mean? In a lesser film, perhaps it wouldn't have stood out to me.
I think Drew is being weird because it's one of the first movies she and her friend produced. So I think she sort of picked the part she wanted and went a little much with it. What holds her down is that she's in a relationship with Noah Wile's character, and he's cool, so I assume she's cool.
And I do one moment in the movie that I thought was wonderful that didn't necessarily even add anything. It was something that I could see a screenwriting teacher say, cut, but it's just her and Professor Monotov saying to each other, Donnie Darko, I know. You know what I mean? And then they kind of like share a laugh. And it's like, that doesn't add anything in particular to the overarching plot, but it does establish something about their relationship and about their separate relationships with Donnie, which is like it's something that you probably already know because you've seen them interact with him. But it's just a cool moment because you do like Donnie and you do see him as exceptional. So to watch these two teachers just sort of have a discussion behind the scenes of like, this kid, right? Is like, it added so much to me. All right. Okay. So then let's roll right in towards the pitches with the first question. Should this movie, Donnie Darko, have a sequel? Yeah, that's a no. That's a big old no.
Okay, our job's done.
Crazy that the director doesn't agree.
I think that when we do movies that maybe shouldn't have, or there's not a lot of great jumping off points for sequels, we usually come up with stuff that's a little more interesting than, you know, a movie that has an obvious sequel baked in. You know, I think our Grease pitches were really interesting. I think
The Shining also yielded some interesting results from a movie that probably we all agreed.
The final results were interesting.
You seem really mad. Okay, so then moving on to the next question. Sequel or prequel? If you're going to do it, how you do it?
Mine's a prequel. I would say prequel because I feel like the only way to do a sequel is to carry forward the plot of Donnie Darko, which will, I think, just intrinsically undo what the movie's trying to do.
Okay.
I would say prequel or tangential.
Oh, neat. I like that better.
Cycle.
That's already got a term. I was so proud of parallelical.
Parallelical.
I will say that I have very little here, but my prequel.
You want to go with me?
Well, this isn't my pitch. This is my, if you're going to do a prequel, here you go. Which is called R. Sparrow. It tells the story of Grandma Death up to and including how she gets caught in her mailbox cycle. It shows her school days to her teaching days, including having a young version of Professor Monotov as a student, and then into her absorption into the time travel science and the writing of her book, as well as interactions with and the influence on Jim Cunningham, the Patrick Swayze character. So there's a lot to fill in there with that character, and I would imagine it would all be interesting and sort of have a similar build to it because she has an inevitable fate that we all know that she slips into. But I do think that there are a lot of unanswered questions there that could be a fun, an interesting watch without feeling like you're treading old ground either, because I feel like not many questions at all are answered about how she got there.
Yeah.
Right.
My pitch, I don't have a ton here, as usual, but I tried to fill in what I do have with enough detail that you feel like you got a good meal.
Take this. Thank you.
This is going to be a prequel that's closer in tone to Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension, which is a movie I really do not enjoy very much.
Interesting.
I want to. I've tried several times. I understand that I'm kind of supposed to like that sort of movie. I just do not. It's charmless for me. Sorry, Buckaroo Banzai. It's called Roberta Sparrow and the Dream Machine. It's going to be, I guess we'll make this movie 2020 or whatever. So we've got Natasha Lyonne as a young Roberta Sparrow in the 60s. Oh yeah. So she's tripping the light fandango and writing a journal on the philosophy of dreams. She spends her time at the Beatnik Slam poetry bar run by Michaela Cole called The Cellar Door. At night, she wanders the city. Yeah, I know. At night, she wanders the city searching for truth and seeking out liminal spaces, trying to find the truth by sheer force of will. During the day, she dreams about a mysterious Frank-esque figure, Lily Tomlin, trying to lead her to Middlesex, Virginia. Lily Tomlin will be playing her future herself. She's also playing Roberta Sparrow, kind of like a The Shining Tony deal, where she's unaware that Lily Tomlin is playing herself, you know. So Lily Tomlin shows up as future kind of Grandma Death, and tries to lead her to Middlesex, much in the same way that Frank is kind of leading Donnie on his path. So she road trips out in her station wagon, eventually meeting up with a bullshit artist played by Divine Joy Randolph from Hulu's recently canceled High Fidelity.
Canceled? Damn.
A team of...
Yeah.
Sorry, bud. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all very upset about it. She also meets up with a team of scientists celebrating at a diner called Mongrels. The scientists are played by John Cho, and I'm going to try and get this name right. Shore Agdashloo. She's the woman from The Expanse with the wonderful gravelly voice. She's an Indian woman with like... Okay, it doesn't matter. Look her up. She's marvelous. I just need her voice to be saying literally anything in this movie. She's great. And some very eye-opening sex workers at a club called Sparkle Motion, played by Maz Mikkelsen, Chris Pine, and Lee Pace. As she gets closer to Middlesex, her journal eventually stops becoming about the philosophy of dreams and becomes about the philosophy of time travel. And her journey to Middlesex ends with her on that same whatever Mulholland Shelf or whatever Donnie's at, overlooking the town, seeing the funnel, the time tubes, essentially setting her up to become, you know, Grandma Death, the teacher at the school, all that stuff. I don't know how the timeline matches up, but I'll fudge the numbers if I have to, because it's meant to be more of a, you know, that feeling when you're driving through the desert where even though you know you're just in Nevada, it kind of feels like you're about to drive off the edge of the world.
Somehow, yeah.
It would sort of be like that. And the whole time we would be getting sort of like, rather than like the countdown days, like 10 days left, 6 days left, we would get, I guess, kind of like Southland Tales, chapters from her journal. The Philosophy of Dreams would begin each segment sequence or whatever. Maybe with some wonderful Natasha Lyonne narration. Voiceover, I know, is a sin, but whatever. And that's Roberta Sparrow and the Dream Machine.
So cool. It sounds like to me that Roberta herself is almost sort of a slave to the hands of destiny. Like, it's not like her own interests or wants or desires are what are leading her to her path. It sounds like her path is being presented to her and she's being placed upon it. I'm not saying this as a criticism. I'm just sort of...
You're right. It would think about it more as Roberta Sparrow is just trying to find the strings that hold the universe together. And she's destined, if you want to call it that, destined to do that and discover it and end up in Middlesex. So that Donnie Darko, the next generation, he will be the one who not only can see and understand the strings, but can even pluck them a little bit to change the universe. And that is, in my mind, what Roberta Sparrow is waiting for at the mailbox. She's waiting for someone to give the book to, someone to pass the torch to. She has this knowledge. No one will take it from her. Until Donnie Darko, with his kind soul, his kind heart, takes it.
Dramatically, I like that very, very much. All right, so moving right along into Lauren's pitch.
Okay, so I don't have a whole lot, but basically...
There's something I want to show you.
Every time I watch the movie, I always feel like there's been... It starts, and, Donnie's on the road, and I always feel like that is the beginning of a second...
Oh, interesting.
...time loop. But that's basically what it is a sequel, but it's also sort of a paralleloquel.
Yes!
Because my thing would be... It would be the October 2nd where things went wrong. So it would be a similar set of events that happens in Donnie Darko, but things don't line up well. The October 2nd would happen. We see the characters. Maybe Donnie doesn't meet Gretchen. But I think the thing that would actually have to happen would be that Mama Darko would die. So because she would die, she wouldn't be able to chaperone Sparkle Motion's trip to Los Angeles, and therefore would not be on the red-eye home in order for that engine to fall
So you're saying her being
in the first
there
place.
inherently
So
affects whether the plane rips apart?
That is the theory I'm going with. Because if she's not on that plane, theoretically, nothing would fall down the portal.
What?
Yeah, but
Wouldn't that-
you never know.
she's not
you never
flying
know.
the
I know.
Weight and that kind of thing.
I'm taking some
You
real,
know.
yeah.
Fair enough.
Or
Fair enough. I don't know how time travel
plane
works. Fuck
air
me.
travel.
Okay, continue.
Yeah, and also in this one, the reason it doesn't go well, and that's why we come to the point where Donnie Darko has to do it a second time. You know, in the actual movie, he has to go through that set of events from October 2nd to the 31st. In mine, Frank the bunny is not there to guide him, and that's why one of the reasons why it goes wrong. Because he doesn't shoot him, he doesn't follow the events that lead him to that point to shoot him in the first place, to make him a manipulated dead that guides him in Donnie Darko.
Are we, perhaps it's not explained, but from your perspective, are we starting this movie earlier than the events of Donnie Darko, but with a Donnie who has been through the events of Donnie Darko?
No, my movie would be, my movie assumes that Donnie Darko comes at the end of the events of my movie, and therefore Donnie Darko exists to fix the events of my movie. Because my movie would show the events that went wrong, like the primary universe, the events that went wrong. So who
are we following?
It would still be Donnie. It would I apologize. It's
tough.
It's a very bare bones idea. It would essentially be a similar movie, but it would play out differently because certain things wouldn't happen. And also the characters aren't being manipulated to make things right yet, so they're playing out in a separate way.
He wouldn't flood the school.
He wouldn't flood the school because all the things that he did, that he would wind up on the golf course, he wouldn't be told the world's ending because Frank's not there to guide him because he hasn't killed him yet.
Yeah, I guess.
Does that make sense?
I'm
like working on like all of
does Donnie recognize that something's wrong on some level?
No, because this is all happening for the first time, if you will. And this is the idea I had, because I always did feel like Donnie Darko started on the tail end of the
I get it. It starts on a note that's already open to interpretation. Did he die? Essentially, is like a question right away. Or what happened is the question, but it's also like he's on the middle of the road on a fallen bicycle.
Yeah, like essentially my movie would end with him like it would show him either going for a bike ride or like he'd be on a bike ride and then he'd crash and then it would cut to black and then it would pick back up in Donnie Darko.
I like that Donnie Darko opens with him waking up on the road and he kind of smiles like he accomplished something. So what I like about your pitch is it takes that moment at the beginning and it sets it up very like, oh, this time it's going to work. Yeah,
like in a way he knows that time has reset.
You are going over the events of the first one. I definitely would consider this a prequel.
Right. But like his mother dying, that would that has its own set of events that would, of course, affect and play out throughout the movie. Like they're dealing with that, like a car crash or something.
She falls up into a plane engine.
And the title, Donnie Darko, and REDO is in brackets.
Oh, very, very cool. I think that you win because what happened with your pitch was what happened to all of us individually with Donnie Darko, which is that we got to analyze, we got to theorize, we got to have fun and make connections. I feel like yours is more in line with the sort of open nature of what the first movie is. Because I went sequel.
There are other things that need to be taken into account here.
Starting with Timeline B, 1989. Donnie awakens in a reality where Gretchen, his mother, and Samantha have died. And he is placed in an asylum after he's murdered Frank. So, he can't go to jail. He's deemed unwell, so they don't send him to juvenile hall. He's in like a center. He's violently angered by the reality he lives in, knowing that the world is ended and should not exist. Because he made his choice already, but he's stuck here. At various points, he's visited by his father, Eddie, his sister, Elizabeth, his therapist, Dr. Thurman, and as sort of a last resort trying to get through to him, Professor Monotov, all of whom wish to help him work through these bizarre issues. So that's Timeline B that is happening alongside Timeline A, which is probably most of the movie. And Timeline A takes place in 1995. Frank Anderson is our lead. He's a successful gallery artist who was made famous in his youth by the creation of the character Death Rabbit, a project that he makes clear he has moved well beyond as an artist. You know, I don't want to be associated with Death Rabbit anymore, but I'm thankful, blah, 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 blah. He's wealthy and independent, but hopelessly and tirelessly disturbed. At a gallery opening, he sees a woman, played by Rachel Lee Cook, who intrigues him and flirts with him a little bit, but ultimately seems disinterested. Later, she comes to his home and asks to be... I'm just uncomfortable saying this. I'm not the type of person who says this. Later, she comes to his home and asks to be fucked by Death Rabbit. Though he is hesitant to do so, he dons the mask again, and while wearing it during the act of making love, he sees a hole in the back of her head sort of start to form, and it freaks him out. That night, he has his first vision of Donnie, who wears a hoodie that masks his face in shadow and a skeleton t-shirt, so disembodied head. Donnie asks that Frank put his mask on, which he unexpectedly in the dream finds himself already holding, but he refuses. Donnie tells him that together they must end the world. Later, back in reality, Frank meets a girl named Madison, played by Anna Paquin, whom he really seems to like. Later, separately, he finds out that the woman from the gallery, the Rachel Lee Cook part, has died by way of self-inflicted gunshot to the head. So it's as if he saw it before. Yes. As his life goes on, Death Rabbit starts to become more and more prevalent. Every person in his life is sort of asking after it or demanding it in some way, shape, or form over the stuff that he wants to work on himself. It even gets to the point that Madison, the Anna Paquin character, asks him to put on the mask for her. He refuses, fearing what might happen to her, knowing what happened to the last girl. The next time he sees him in a dream, Frank asks Donnie to show him his face. Donnie refuses unless Frank puts on the mask. He does in the dream, and Donnie shows his face. Frank asks if he knows Donnie. Donnie doesn't answer. End of dream. When he wakes up, he remembers to some extent who Donnie is and writes down Lizzie Darko's brother, like on a notepad next to his bed. As he goes about his day, no one in his life is willing to accept anything from him that isn't Death Rabbit. It pushes to the point that Madison shows up at his house that night and threatens him at gunpoint to put the mask on and make love to her. He catches her off guard, is able to overpower her, and sort of runs away from the situation. He flees his life and goes about the task of finding Elizabeth Darko, Maggie Gyllenhaal. When he finds her, she tells him of her brother's death at the turbine engine all those years ago, and how her mother could never get over it. And it changed her mother forever. Her mother sort of snapped, killed Samantha, and also killed Gretchen. Like, sought them out as people that shouldn't exist without fully understanding it, killed them. So Frank goes to meet Rose, Mary McDonnell, at the same facility where Donnie is being kept in his timeline. So she is in an asylum, but a different...
In the same asylum that Donnie's in?
She calls Frank, in their discussion, the one who killed her son, even though it doesn't seem like she fully understands what that means. But their conversation is mostly just a stage for Mary McDonnell to perform on. It's only one scene. She's going to kill it. And at the end of it, she touches him on the chest, which causes a chest sphere to form. And he's never heard of this. He doesn't know what it is, but it starts building a path and he follows it. She can't see it. And that's the end of their scene. So he follows it, and it seems to be guiding him to sort of the exit until it suddenly branches off and starts a second path that goes upward toward the ceiling and then seems to disappear. It's not until he puts the Death Rabbit mask on, which he, again, finds himself unexpectedly holding, but is it reality this time? We don't know. He puts it on, and he's able to see that the chess sphere leads to a portal in the sky. He sort of sees himself go through it, much like Donnie sees himself go through the portal when he's doing all the cellar door stuff at the end of Donnie Darko. And that's where he meets Donnie, who is in his timeline, still in the asylum. He meets Donnie there, and the two men embrace, and they seem happier than they've ever been. And then the world ends around them. Then Frank sort of wakes up with a start, finding himself back at the diverging chess spheres crossroads, and he looks unsure of what path to take. But the last place he looks is up, and then we cut to black. The end. And I call this film Frankie and Donnie.
Sorry, go ahead.
I don't hate that. I think that's charming. I really like the idea that people in you know, the universe that's not meant to be, if that's how we're going to look at it. I mean, maybe it's just Rose, but I like the idea that people are kind of looking around like, nah, none of this is supposed to be here. And they're just kind of like itching to just kill themselves, to kill each other, to kill the universe, the world, whatever. That's interesting.
I was going to ask how you bridge the events of the end of Donnie Darko with the timelines in your story.
Well, I think it seems like Donnie's timeline is a timeline in which the turbine doesn't fall on him, but the events of the first one happen. So it's as if he wakes up outside of his own control into a reality that he purposefully tried to prevent and is stuck there until 6 years later, Frank is able to sort of hold up his end, and they are literally able to end the world together, which was always the point, I guess. However, you know, it's open to interpretation, blah, blah, blah. But my thinking behind the diverging chess spheres and the fact that Frank is able to make the choice at the end is that one would assume that Frank would choose the exit, because the whole movie he's been fighting against this sort of everyone wanting him to be the Death Rabbit. However, upon ending the world with Donnie and seeing that, it's kind of like trying to have the cheat of the Inception ending, where it's technically open to interpretation, but the top does start to fall a little. So, you know, there's your answer. So having him look up is sort of him choosing. And I'm trying to, I've built up all these big ideas, but my smaller idea that I really like it coming from is sort of this: what would someone choose, being themselves and perhaps having a life that is not spectacular, in which you don't know how much of a purpose you serve, versus following the path that is your predestiny, the thing that everybody wants from you, the thing that you are supposed to do. What feels better? I guess, to me, the sadder / creepier / cooler idea is ultimately that despite everything he's thought he's wanted the whole time, he wants to end the world with Donnie, because that's what he's always supposed to have done. Again, I don't think the movie should have a sequel.
That's cool. Yeah.
Because I like I like that the end of the world that is specified in Donnie Darko is not the end of the world. It is, but he's able to prevent. Yes, it is. Yes, and ultimately by his choice, he's able to prevent the end of the larger world by ending his own world. Whereas in this, I guess, in order to continue that story at all, I feel like, okay, I guess maybe there needs to be a bigger picture. Perhaps the end of the world is still on the table.
Those are neat ideas.
But I feel like we're going to need a tiebreaker. I personally am going to be voting for all three. I
was thinking that too. Yeah,
I am happy that we did this, because I feel like any fan of the first one would be as well, because I think that these are all fun mind mazes to send them down.
But how to pick a winner?
Right.
You know, I would vote for all three, but I'm still voting for Lauren's. It was essentially giving us the fun of a Back to the Future Part 2 by saying, you're back. You're with these, you're in this familiar atmosphere, and yet it doesn't make sense.
Right.
I also really like the title.
I'm glad.
Donnie Darko.
That was kind of a grab at the last second.
That worked. That's going to put you over the top.
That's what I'm saying.
No disrespect, Travis, to yours. Yours made me happy in a similar way. It's just sort of like, I guess I'd just rather spend the movie with Donnie if I could.
Oh, yeah. No, that's my movie was pretty far removed from from the first one,
No,
even like
well,
in flavor and everything.
Yeah.
So
no, I think
maybe
you
it sounds
have
like
the right flavor. I think we all did, to be honest. And I want us all to pat ourselves on the back and feel good about what we did because it's an impossible task.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yet I did it.
We all did.
But I mean, like, really, really well. I did it.
Nailed it.
You can tell how good my ideas are because they rarely win.
We have a winner, Lauren Picorni's redone Darko.
We got away with it.
Excellent work.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do Unsung Heroes.
Hit it, Ball Jr.
Unsung heroes.
I want to go first.
No, I'm going to go first. Okay, go ahead, Lauren.
And for listeners who don't know what this is, Unsung Heroes, we talk about lesser known or lesser regarded actors or characters in the movie who added a whole lot from extras to just small parts that don't normally get given the time of day.
In Donnie Darko, I really like the small fellow who is helping Sharita with her Autumn Angel act, and he's just like putting crispy fall leaves into the fan. I always really like how
he has another featured moment in the movie, correct? I remember him being...
Yeah,
that's
he's
right.
The one he's like, how do I deal with bullies?
You mean at the conference with Jim Cunningham? Yeah. So he is also in Jim Cunningham's video at the very beginning. And I believe Jim Cunningham pats him on the butt.
He sure does, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Is that why he wants to know how to fight?
But he asks Jim himself. Shit. Yeah, that kid's great.
Well, I like him and his fall leaves.
I was the guy riding with Frank at the end of the movie.
From
the clown,
Dollhouse.
Fran Kran.
It is Fran Kran.
Right? I immediately recognized him. The guy dressed as the clown.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have one for... sorry, we didn't do Paul's. What a piece of shit I am. Go ahead, Paul.
Leroy the plumber, the guy who, after Donnie has chopped the pipe and flooded the school, I think he has one or two lines, but they are very boisterous, memorable lines. They're like, he's just overworked from the start. Yeah, he only has a moment there, but it really adds something. Yeah. And like, it just brought me joy to watch this guy. I also put down the kid at the very end, the Darko's neighbor, who explains to Gretchen what happened. Not only does he, like, because the ending moment is really cool and cerebral and sci-fi, because you're reading into the fact that these two women who should have been dead are recognizing something in each other and waving at each other. And then he adds on to it and makes it comedic when it doesn't need to be, but it's wonderful because he starts waving. And then that's literally the end. It's like that added layer of fun is really special. And apart from that, I just think he gives a great performance when he's recounting what happened. It's like very natural. It feels very much like what a kid would be like.
He was
as Darko, I can find
for me too.
no one.
No unsung heroes. No heroes.
The only thing I can think of it's a staging thing. So we're definitely scraping the bottom of the barrel here. But when S. Darko is violently hit by a car, she is then revealed to be laying just like perfectly flat with her arms down by her sides and just a little bit of blood on her. And it just doesn't translate to me that she got like fucking wrecked by a Buick. It looks like that actress was told to just sort of lay down right there. And she's like, just lay down flat like this. And they're like, yeah, whatever, go for it. And then we had to pretend like
so
she
much
had been
about
killed by
that
a
moment
car.
didn't work. Much like the rest of the movie.
I kept having the thought that if she hadn't grown up so pretty,
that's
she would
an
not
interesting
have been cast in the movie.
Thought because to be honest, based on the nature of how this movie was made, I think any actor from the original movie who would say yes would have been cast in the movie. Mostly, I think you're right, and that's an unfortunate thing about the way movies are made, but I think in this case, she probably still would have, just for the sake of, it's official, guys. And I'm going to move into plugs, and I'm going to guess that you guys have them, and that we're familiar with them.
Yeah, got the usual. I have an Etsy shop. Pop that Funko, make custom Funkos. If you want a Funko that doesn't exist, I can help you out.
My plugs, as always, just Theater of Tomorrow and The Hotel, our science fiction and horror podcast, which will be returning. One of them should have returned by now. Theater of Tomorrow, theater with an R-E, or
Okay.
The Hotel,
Well,
available
I have
wherever podcasts
questions
are
and
sold.
comments related to that, and I will leave the nature of such things to our listeners a mystery as I say goodbye. On the next follow-up Showdown, our guest today, Sachin Medhekar, and the movie he has chosen, Highlander 2: The Quickening.
Well, I want to point out that the second movie was able to up one on the how quickly we're gonna jump into a sex scene.
Yeah.
It's like whoa, we're not here. You
Right.
just met
Minutes
and
ago.
murdered people.